Hello and welcome to this mini tutorial. I'm gonna dive straight into the gameplay. I have determined a few words that I want to place in the first scenario of this case file, and I will now explain how I found these words. I guess getting started is the hardest part, to find some letters that you can place in the riddle, especially since you are very limited at the beginning. So how did I choose these words? I looked at the description of the first scenario and read it. So let's take a closer look at that maybe. And I'm going to look for strange stuff in there. So it says, Margaret sat among the curious as Dr. Vance revealed a device that sawned space like butter. So there's the first weird word in this sentence. So what I did is I took a look at the first scenario. So let's take a look at that. And I looked for 4-letter words. And I didn't have to look very long because there's a 4-letter word. It starts with an S and it ends with an N. And if I put an A there, then, you know, this would say AU ends with an O. So here's my next word, like auto. So I will put a T there, and there I've already got my first start letter that I can place into the riddle. Okay, so let's continue. Let's have another look at the description. Folding dimensions with impossible elegance. Whispers rippled through the hall. Some called it genius, others heresy. She watched envy bloom in rival scholars' eyes, even as her own instincts screamed. The votes of reality were shifting oddly. So again, we've got this weird formulation here with the votes of reality. So taking another look at the scenario 1, and after looking for like some 5-letter words maybe, we've got like this and this one, and I can see here that this one has an O and an E. Second letter is O, fourth letter is an E, and when I take a look at the letters that are worth a 4 mythos value, there it could be an F, and it could be a V. So yeah, votes. So I already got the votes in here. All right. So what else did I take a look at? So I have the votes, I have the song, and then there's also like was envy in there, which is there's a 4-letter word here which starts with an E and ends in 2 4-letter 4 mythos value words, which both the V and the Y are worth 4. So this is pretty sure. Yeah, you can be pretty sure that this is envy. And then we've got auto, I already mentioned that. And then if we take a look at what we got here, like if we've got, you know, an N there and an E there, and this one is worth 3, so 3 could be a B, yeah, it could be also be an M. So if we put an M there, then we can put like name, yeah, put name here. So I also put name. And then if I take a look at what I have here, then I would have a U and an A here. So at that point we would have pretty good indication of what comes here, which is like human. So I've already taken out the letters that I want to place. Some of these are not complete because they are already placed from the other words. When I play with a printed case file, then I usually use a pencil to put in my guesses first, and then when I roll for the letters and place them, I overwrite my pencil letters with a pen, so they're permanent. So just by looking at the scenario description and looking at the first scenario and looking for hints, I've already got a good start. Yeah, there's plenty of letters that I can place. You don't even need to find out that many. You can just, find maybe one or two and see if those help. Pay special attention to the opponent words. So we've got this word here and we've got this word here. We want to defeat these guys as soon as possible so they can't cause any more damage while we are in this scenario. So I think the first word that I'm going to try to form is name here. And I don't even know what this one is yet, but let's have a look. S here and an H here, and votes here, a V. So SH, V, I guess an I, so shiv, like a knife, right? So a shiv. So we already have the next word that we can use to defeat the opponent in this lane. One more important thing to keep in mind is that at the beginning of the game, we can only place letters next to our entry tile, which is this one. They are marked with this bluish tint. So that means if we want to have humans here, we would need an M. If we want to have auto here, we would need a T. If we want votes here, we would need a T. Or if we want name here, we want an M. So M and T's we need really to start placing letters, more letters. I'm going to start in phase 1 investigation. And here I just roll the 2 dice, and we got a 6 on the investigator die and a 5 on the mythos die, which is a result of 65. If we take a look, that would be a wild card. Very nice. But first, we go to phase 2 enemy attacks, and we compare the result of the mythos die with the trigger value of the opponents in the current scenario. And we can see there's only 2 scribes in here which trigger on a 6. So we do not trigger them. Moving to phase 3 constellation, we checked if we rolled doubles. We did not, so we skipped that phase. Go to phase 4, dice manipulation. Margaret can manipulate her investigator die by raising or lowering it by 1 point. So she could make this a 5. She can't raise it anymore because there is no 7. But since we rolled a wild card, the star result on the chart, we do not need to manipulate our die. We have a wildcard result, which means we can place any letter we want into the scenario in a valid tile. And we want to defeat this scribe opponent first, so I'm going to place an M right here. So now we have placed our first letter into the scenario, which means we can also place letters here, here. So we have some more options now. So we can use an E, we can use an A, and we can use an E. This resolved select and use the letter, and we place the letter, and then we have check for completed words. We haven't completed any words yet, and resolve constellation counter. The constellation counter only has to be resolved if we did not place a letter in the current scenario this turn, which we did, so we can move on to game turn 2 and roll our dice again. We rolled an 11. Moving to phase 2, we compare the mythos die value to the trigger value of the scribe. We are lower, it's all good. And then we go to phase 3, constellation. And if you roll doubles, cross a box in the constellation chart and consult the block at the bottom of the sheet for this case file's constellation effect and resolve it immediately. So we've rolled the 11 and we have to cross out a box in the constellation chart and take a look at the constellation effect, test law or influence against a value of 8. So remember that we have an 11 roll the die and we rolled a 5. We have not assigned any value to our attributes yet, so we have failed this constellation challenge, which means we have to clear a mythos slot or lose 1 sanity. We don't have something in the mythos slot. We would have to discard a letter from a mythos slot if we would have one. We don't, so we lose 1 sanity. I'm going to use the marker to mark off 1 sanity box. Phase 4, dice manipulation. We rolled an 11, so we could make that 21 as well. The 11 is an A and the 21 is an F. We can use the A right now, the 11, so we're just going to do that. And get the A from our name guess and put it right here. Second letter placed into the scenario. So that resolved phase 5 and 6, and in 7 we check for completed words, which we don't have yet. Resolve the constellation counter, which we don't need to because we have placed a letter in the scenario this turn. So we're going to move back to phase 1 investigation. Roll our dice and we get a 34. Phase 2 enemy attacks. We check the mythos value against the trigger. It doesn't trigger. I'm not gonna mention that anymore, yeah, from now on. And we also did not roll doubles, so we can also skip constellation phase and move right into dice manipulation phase again. So we could make this a 24 or a 44. So the 24 would be an I, which we don't need right now. The 34 would be an N, which we can use later for envy and also for Sawn. Oh, we can place the N right there. So there we go. We're going to use the N. That's the N of the Sawn also. So we're going to place that right there into the letter. Which means we have resolved phase 5, 6, and then 7. We still don't have a completed word. I'm not going to mention that anymore from now on. But soon we will. We also have no constellation counter step since we have placed a letter in the scenario this turn. That was the last time I mentioned that also. Next game turn, phase 1. Roll our dice. We get a 43. So we go to dice manipulation. We could make this a 33 or a 53. So the 33 would be an M, which we can use here, right here. And we could also make it or leave it at a 43, which is a Q, which has a mythos value of 10, right? And 10 is the highest value. And if we want to assign this to one of our attributes, it would give us a value of 5. So the 10 mythos value divided by 2, rounded down, we could assign a 5. And since it's important for Margaret, since she has to test law or influence when the constellation chart advances, we should do that. So let's take the Q, divide that by 2 to get a 5. I'm going to use a dice for that, or a die. I'm going to put that on law. That fits well for Margaret. Put that to a rotation value of 5. When we do that, it doesn't cost us anything. So if we later decide to assign a 1 maybe to agility and then want to raise it to a 3, at that point we could exchange the 1 for a 3, but that would raise the constellation counter by 1. Maybe we get to that. It doesn't happen a lot, but maybe. So remember, if you assign a value to an attribute first, it doesn't cost you anything. If you replace a value of an attribute with another value, that will raise the constellation counter by 1. We move straight to phase 7. and we haven't completed the word, but we haven't placed a letter in the scenario. So we have to resolve the constellation counter. We have to raise it by 1 and then roll the mythos die and roll higher than the current counter value, which we did, so everything is fine. We can start the next turn by rolling our dice, and we get a 32, which doesn't trigger enemies and it doesn't trigger constellation, and we could make this a 22 or a 42. So the 22 would be a G, the 32 would be an L, and the 42 would be a P, which is not very useful for us at the moment at all. But we also want to assign something to a mythos value slot rather quickly, because if we fail our constellation check or test, then we have to clear mythos slot or we would lose 1 sanity. So it's always good to have at least one of these in here. So what I can do now from the options that I rolled, so let's have a look at that again. So a 22 would be a G. So that would be a mythos value of 2. Let's check some. There's a 2 here, so that there's another 2 here, another 2 here. So that could be G's, but it could also be a D, right? So the G could be useful. 32 is an L, so an L, let's check if one of them is given maybe as a hint. Yeah, there's an L here. So the L looks good. There's also the 42, which is a P. So let's have a look at some of the hints. No, I can't see any P. And the P has has a mythos value of 3. So let's check if there's any three hints in here. I can't see any really. So I think I'm going to go with our 32 result, which is the L that we can use here. And I'm gonna take an L and just place it in one of the mythos knowledge slots. And when we do that, store the letter in a free mythos knowledge slot, we lose 1 sanity point and move to phase 7. So I'm gonna take a damage token, losing another point of sanity. And then we move to phase 7. We haven't completed any words. We have not placed a letter in the current scenario. So the counter rises by 1 and we have to test for it. Oh, and we rolled a 2, which is not higher than the current counter value, which means the constellation advances by 1 again. Which means we also now have to immediately test for law or influence again. So we just assigned a nice 5 value to law. So if we test for it again now, we have a 7 plus 5 is 12, which means we beat the challenge rating of 8, which means we gain 1 plus 1 life or plus 1 sanity. So we don't have any life force damage, so we get rid of a sanity damage token. And this resolves the current turn. We start the next turn by rolling the dice and get a 51. No opponent trigger, no constellation trigger. We could make this a 41 or a 61. 41 is an O, the 51 is an S, and the 61 is a W. So we still haven't gotten wild cards. I would really like to kill this guy, but currently they're also not hitting us, so it's not so bad, right? So let's check again what we had. The 51 would be an S, which is fine because we need an S over here. And also for the votes, but we can't place an S yet. And the 61 was the W. We need that here, so there we go. Let's take the W, place it into the scenario here. We haven't completed the word yet. close to completing 2 words. But we've placed a letter, so no constellation counter. Step. Starting the next turn. I'm going to accelerate the turn now a bit, less explaining, unless there's something new going on. So 43, which would give me a Q. It's a 10 value again, which is nice. And since this is Margaret's second case file, the Mythos slot is unlocked already. So we could use that quite well. But we could also make this a 43, which, a 33, which is an M, which we need but can't place yet. Oh yes, we can. So we could just use the 33, or the 63 would be a Y. But again, the 43, the 10 result, it's quite tempting to put that as an attribute value. But I think it's also important to get ahead in the puzzle. So we're just going to use the 33M event to place an M into our human, which means we move to phase 7. Nothing happens here yet. So we start the next turn. So you see how fast a turn can go, really. So we rolled a 33, which means we must advance the constellation, which means we must test for our law skill. So remember the 33. 6 plus 5 is 11. So easy. We can heal 1 point of damage, so we can heal 1 point of sanity damage. Our 33, in dice manipulation, we can make it a 43, which would be a Q again. Or we could make it a 23, make it a 23, which is an H, which we can use here for our human, but we can't place it yet. So the 23, the H, the 33, the M, which we don't need at the moment, and the 43, the Q, which would give us the 10 again. But since we need the H soon, I think we're just gonna lower our investigator die with Margaret's ability to 23, which gives us an H. And we can put that into a Mythos knowledge slot. It causes 1 point of sanity damage when we do that. But that's fine. And since we did not place a letter into the scenario this turn, we have to raise the constellation counter to 3. Test for it. Still lucky, rolling a 4, which is higher. So next turn, we get a 65. 65 is a wild card, which is nice. Nothing triggers, no constellation, so we can finally beat the first opponent by putting the E here, which completes the word in the opponent's lane, which means he is now defeated and can no longer trigger. From now on, only this guy could trigger. So we move to phase 7, and we have completed a word in the riddle. So we get 1 experience points, and we also get another experience point for defeating the scribe. So this shows how many experience points you gain when defeating an opponent. So I'm gonna grab 2 experience points and put them here. And there was a question if you have to spend experience points when you buy items. No, you don't really have to do that. You just, what I usually do is I mark them as spent. So when playing pen and paper, when I receive an experience point, I do a single line, and when I spend them, I cross them out completely. And in the tabletop simulator module, you can just turn them, flip them around, and they become gray. So we've got our first 2 experience points, and we do no longer need to worry about this opponent. Next turn, we roll a 62, which would be an X, no triggers. So an X is not very useful for us, but the X has an attribute value of 4. So a Mythos value of 8 divided by 2 is an attribute value of 4. And we do need to solve an observation check with difficulty 10 to get into the next scenario, to place a letter here. So I think I'm going to use that 4 as the observation attribute score. And move to phase 7, raise the constellation counter by 1, raise the constellation counter by 1, check against it. Still lucky, roll a 5, which is higher than the 4. Next turn, we have a 43, which doesn't trigger anything, and it is a Q. So we have our 10 Mythos value again, which would be nice for another attribute. But we need to also progress in the scenario. So we should focus on the words that we want to place. Let's take a look at the 33 is an M. We don't need that at the moment either. And a 53 would be a U, which is fine because we need that for human. So we have our U there. Which also opens up the word auto that we can place now. So again, this is pretty much it for this turn. We haven't completed the letter or anything. So next turn, we roll a 42. The 42 would be a P. We can also make this a 32, which would be an L, or a 52, which would be a T. The T is something that we can use for our votes. So we're going to use that. And that's pretty much it again. So next turn, you can see it can go pretty quickly. 43, we roll the Q again, so we can lower that to 33, which is an M, which we don't really need anymore at the moment. Or 53, which would be a U, which is also not useful for us at the moment. So we have the Q again. We're just gonna go ahead and assign that to our Mythos attribute, which in the last scenario is mostly used in the last scenario, and it's mostly has a difficulty of 13. So getting Mythos to 5 is quite important. This is Margaret's second case file, so she can already place a value in her Mythos attribute slot. In her first case file, you would have to fill the first row of the constellation chart to unlock that slot. This means we did not place letter in the current scenario, raising the constellation counter by 1, testing against it. And now we have failed, which means it resets to 0. And we have to resolve a constellation effect. So these are not really a problem anymore against 11. So 6 plus 5, 11. We passed it. We can even heal our sanity damage again. I've been very lucky not getting any triggers on the Oblivion Scribes, but also not very very many wild cards. So this is a good explanation of how this works, pretty much. Yeah. So I'm gonna finish this. not going to explain that much until it's something new. Next turn, constellation advances because I rolled doubles. So we now have 4, which means we also have to resolve the constellation effect. So we had a 22. But we have to test for our law. Oh, 3 plus 5 is 8. Oh, barely made it. So we can heal something, but we are not damaged. So we don't need to heal anything. And then we have our 22, which is a G, which we really do not need. And we could also make it a B, which we also do not need. Or we could make this a 32, which is an L, which we also do not need. So you see, we're not receiving much any damage really, but we're also not getting wild cards. So we have to juggle around with letters a lot, but that's okay. So we decide to go for the L and place that in one of our Mythos knowledge slots. We already have another L there, but that's fine. They're used quite often. But it also means we're losing a point of sanity again. And we have not placed the letter, so we advance the counter by 1. Resolve it, nothing happens. Next turn, we have a 63, which is a Y. So we definitely need one of these for our envy word here. So we could store that in a Mythos knowledge slot. Yeah, let's do that. Let's store our Y here, losing another point of sanity by doing that, and raising the constellation counter by 1, testing against it. Oh, and we failed, so it goes back to 0, but the constellation advances by 1, and we have to test for, with a 4 plus 5 is 9, so we have passed, which means we heal 1 point of sanity. Next turn, 52. The 52 would be a T, the 42 would be a P, and the 62 would be an X, which we don't need, but the X is worth a lot. So I think we're going for the 52, which is a T, which we will need. The latest we will need it here. So we're gonna fill another Mythos slot. Take another point of sanity damage. Again, since Margaret, this is our second case file. The last 2 Mythos knowledge slots, they are locked for an investigator's first case file. To unlock these slots, the first one unlocks when you fill the first row of the experience bar, and the second one when you fill the second row. Right, we have not placed a letter, so we advance the constellation, no, only by 1, and test against it. Ooh, okay, lucky with a 2. Starting the next turn, rolling doubles, which means the constellation takes effect. And we have to test, so we rolled an 11. So we have to test. 5 plus 5 is 10, so we passed, and we can get rid of one of the sanity damage, luckily. And then the 11 would be an A, which we can use. So let's do that. Let's fill in the song. So this will mean soon if we get an S, we can fill that. We can We could have also put it here, yeah, but this will be a nice experience boost here with the book special tile that we are completing. So we have placed something into the scenario, which is fine. We can start the next turn. We roll a 52. The 52 is a T. It's not useful. We don't need one at the moment. Oh, yes, we do, actually. Obviously, for our auto. So we can use the T for our auto. So we already have a T here, so it doesn't really matter. But we're going to take the T anyway and just place it and keep the T for later. Place the T here, which means we can also soon complete auto, the word auto. We have placed the T there, which means we can start the next turn. And we roll the 46. The 6 triggers the scribe, the remaining scribe. We have not defeated him yet, which means he causes us 1 point of damage. We have a 46, which is a wild card, which is very nice. So let's complete another word. The most useful word to complete at the moment would be the coin stack, because we can use that to manipulate our investigator die an additional time. So we're gonna pick an O and place that here. Moving to phase 7, we have completed a word, which means 1 experience point. And we can now use this coin stack. So next turn, we roll a 35, which is another wild card. So we can complete the next word. So let's make sure we have some experience by taking an S, putting that here. So moving to phase 7, we get 1 experience point for completing a word and another one for collecting the book. So now we already have 5 experience points. And then we can start the next turn. We have a 36, which triggers the remaining scribe, who damages us for 1 point of damage. But 36, we get another wild card, which means we can now complete another word. Oh, not yet, but soon. So let's grab the. So let's take care of the second enemy, so we can complete the rest of the scenario in peace. So we need an H here and an I here and a V here. So we don't have a V yet. So let's take the V. We can't place it. Yes, we can. We have placed an O there. So let's take a V and place it here. So we can also complete this one and move on to the next phase, next turn. We roll a 42, which normally is a P. And the P is not really useful to us at the moment. So this could also be a 52, which is a T, which is also not really useful for us at the moment. We're going to take the P. We said we're going to take the P, place it here, getting our H from the Mythos knowledge, which raises the constellation modifier by 1. But then we can take our H and place it in our letter right here. Next turn, 62 would be an X. This was not a very useful roll. I think we're gonna just assign a value of 4 to one of our attributes. I think that should be agility. That doesn't cost us anything, but we haven't placed a letter into the scenario, so we have to resolve the constellation counter, and we failed, so the constellation advances by 1, which means we have to test against our law, which is 8 plus 5, easy pass. Next turn, we roll a 12. which is a B, or a 22, which would be a G, or with our coin stack, it could also be a 32, which would be an L. Now it's about time to think about some more words that could be here. So we have envy here, and then we have tuna here. But anyways, we have to resolve our result. A 12 has a value of 3, the 22 has a value of 2, so we're just gonna go ahead and assign a 1 to strength for now, which doesn't cause anything bad to happen. Forgot to reset that to 0. It rises by 1. We have to check against it, and we're fine. Next turn, we roll a 56, which triggers the Oblivion Scribe once more, but also for the last time. He deals 1 more point of damage to us. And then we can place a wild card, which is going to be an eye. To complete the Shiv here, moving to phase 7, we've completed the word, defeating the last scribe. So 1 experience points and another experience point for the scribe, which already gives us 7 experience points. And from now on, we no longer have to worry about taking damage in this scenario, because there are no more opponents in this scenario. There are still some useful special tiles in here, like this Joker, which allows us to transform any of the stored Mythos slots that we have into a vocal. And there's also the bag here, which would allow us to manipulate either the investigator or the Mythos die by +1 or -1 if we spend it. Very useful. So we should try to get an S definitely. This one is useful too. So we should try to get another S if we can, but you can already see, so we need 2 S's. And this one here allows us to exchange one of our stored Mythos letters to another consonant, any other consonant. And this is a healing potion. When we complete this word, we can choose to heal either 4, the length of the word, 4 life force, or 4 sanity. And if we want to just complete this scenario now, we could just fill in the tuner, and then we would get, so let's take out a U and an A. So we have an N here. So we need a U, an N, and an A to quickly complete the scenario, which I'm going to do to finish this tutorial. And that means we're going to roll our dice, getting a 54, which is a V, which we need for envy, but we can't really place it there yet. We really need a U. We really need a U now. So the V will be placed here. So we're just gonna store the V. Take a point of sanity, damage, raise the constellation, counter, resolve it. Everything's fine. Next turn, we get a 45, which is a wild card. So we're gonna use the U and place that here. And then next turn, we have a 56, which is another wild card. So we're gonna place the N over here. And then in the next turn, we get a 51, so we have an S. So we said we wanted to use an S. Votes, which in phase 7 gives us another experience point. And we can now use this Joker to get a vowel here, and we need an A, so we're going to use one of our else, get rid of that, and make this an A. We haven't placed a letter in the scenario this turn, so we have to raise the counter, check against it, fail, so the counter resets, but the constellation advances by 1. We're going to test our attribute. We pass easily, so we can heal. Let's heal a life force damage and start the next turn. So we roll a 12, which is a B. We're just going to take the B. Or maybe the other one is more useful. So the 22 would be, no, it's fine. The B. We're going to exchange that for the A, raising our constellation counter. And then we place the A here. Going to phase 7. We have completed a word. There's no special here, but we still get an experience point. And then we have 9 experience points. And now we could say we complete this scenario and move on to the next one. Or we could say, no, we still want to complete some words here. But let's say we complete the scenario here. We have 9 experience points. We can now spend these 9 experience points on equipment and artifacts. And here's one tip. If a character can't manipulate their mythos die, you should get something that you can manipulate the mythos die with as soon as possible. But also take a look at the damage that the enemies deal. So in the next scenario, we will have 2 scribes and a torsion worm, which means we can take, if we are lucky, they all trigger only at 6, but if they trigger until we have killed them, we can take at the beginning, we can take 3 points of damage per turn. Could, if we roll a 6. So you might also want to take a look at getting an armor. So it's not cheap, but you don't have to worry about any of the opponents that only deal 1 point of damage anymore, which is quite powerful. Unless they gain armor piercing through something, which is true for the torsion worm. So if the torsion worm is alive in a scenario, the scribes gain armor piercing. So there is a torsion worm here, so both of these guys have armor piercing. So it doesn't make any sense. So until we've killed this guy, these guys will have armor piercing. And since he is quite far back in the scenario, it will take us a while to kill him. So we really should get something that will make it easier for us to gain, to get a wild card. With 5, most of the 5s and 6 on the mythos value will be a wild card. So there's 2 options here. We have the Scrying Lens, which is only 6 experience points, which allows us to raise the mythos die value by 1, but then we need to test against our mythos value on 8 or lose a point of sanity if we fail, which is okay. We have a solid 5 there now. So I think we're going to take the Scrying Lens for 6 experience points. Just going to flip these and get this one, which means we only have 3 experience points left, which means we can't afford anything else at the moment. So you see, it's also important to solve as many words as you can in here, in every scenario, to get as many experience points. The second, we can now start the second scenario by placing a letter here. Get a T next, which we have already stored in our mythos knowledge slot, so it makes things a bit easier. So this is how I solved the first scenario of this new case file, Margaret Lane